Hi, everybody. This is Wendy, and this is Let's Talk About Love. So, I'm going to try to get through this video with the empath narcissistic dynamic. I was struggling with it a bit because as I was peeling back the layers and trying to kind of get my thoughts on paper and hash out what I wanted to talk about, I realized that there was more healing I needed to do. It's probably a lifelong process, this healing thing, but when you get really deep in and things are going really well and stuff like that, you'll get reminded here and there that, yes, you have more layers to go through. There is more healing to go through, and that's okay. We'll do this. So the narcissistic empath journey for me started with my mom. I'm a daughter of a narcissistic mother. She has passed decades ago. But and for credit for her, she was probably 100 times worse abused than I was. And, terrible childhood abuse often will take you one way or another. A narcissist or an empath. A narcissist is going to disassociate emotionally completely. They cannot face their shadow. They cannot, they have to have outside validation. They're not capable of making their own. They cannot fill their own dark spaces, and their emotions have to be regulated completely externally. An empath is all emotion, and they read everybody's emotions. They absorb those emotions. They react to those emotions that aren't even theirs. I mean, so severely sometimes it can make you sick. So, with mom, she was very disassociative, and we think there was other mental health issues as well, possibly what we used to call multiple personality disorder, but they call it something different now. And basically, with a narcissist, you cannot bond. There is no true bond. There is really no love. If you don't have self-love, you don't really have love to give. If you don't have self-love, you really kind of don't know what love is, and and so you can't confidently give love if you have none for yourself and you don't know what it is. You have an idea of it, but you don't have that absolute feeling, that connection. It's almost impossible, so having a mom as a narcissist and being so disconnected and sorry, I'm moving the phone around, I can't get comfortable. So disconnected, we just never bonded. And she would like feed us her trauma at a really, really young age, really lay on us to dilute what she was doing to us. She would lay on us what she experienced, which, it's okay to share with your children your experiences and stuff, but you have to kind of be careful how young they are and how much you do it. Because, as a child that becomes an empath through the abuse and stuff, you start laying that kind of stuff on them, and they feel that, they take on almost the guilt of that, the pain of that. And then if you're using it to override or to dilute what they're doing to you, that's adding trauma to a child. When you trauma bond with your child by really shoving your trauma down their throat at a young age that they can't digest. They can't reason. They can't, it just becomes added trauma. So, a lot of narcissists, the abuse from a narcissist can be physical, physiological, mental, emotional, and spiritual, sexual, all of that. With my mom, we experienced pretty much all of it without the sexual, which is good because that's a whole nother layer that I don't think I could have survived. And, through that kind of trauma is how the empath is born. The empath learns to shrink. How little space can I possibly take? so that I just blend in and I don't upset or disappoint or make someone angry or get in the way or frustrate or, how small can I shrink? How little space can I possibly take to fit? Because I have no choice. I can't go anywhere. I'm stuck. I'm a kid, you know, as she was when she went through everything she went through. And, it's God, I've lost my thoughts here for a second because I think faster than I speak, as we know. But it's like I said, you'll end up in a narcissistic type of personality or an empath personality. As an empath, you're always reading the room. You're always dodging. You're always dodging emotions, and it's just this very protective survival. It's literally survival. And then you take that with you for the rest of your life. You take that empathy with the rest of your life, and and that can be a really good thing. Being an empath is a really good thing, but it's also very difficult. It's more vulnerable because you're not just dealing with your emotions and your own healing, but you're feeling everybody else's, and you can read people and people's energy so well. Being an empath, you can read energy more than you can a human, so you see lies differently. You see behavior patterns. You recognize it's a survival mood. It's a movement, a survival thing. You're constantly dodging between danger and God, how do I describe this? You're just constantly reading the room. But at the point that I'm at now is that I'm not absorbing as much. I recognize, I see, I can feel it. I can control how much I feel it and how much it affects me. Because if you let it affect you, someone else can literally make you sick, by their trauma, if you take it on. And, I've come to a point where I don't take it on, but I realize I have the power to influence and help that energy change. If someone's in a moment that they're experiencing a lot of trauma or just something very negative, you have the power to help them with that, not just absorb it yourself and not deal with what it could do to you, but help them get through it better. How do I describe that? I don't know. It's just raising your energy, raising your frequency, and your attitude and how you present yourself, how you speak to them, showing kindness, just showing love. That's how you change the energy. It's really that simple, but you have to get in a space in yourself first to be able to give that to others. And that's what I'm really working on, and, with a narcissist empath dynamic, with me, with the empathy, I actually started repelling narcissists throughout my life. I might have had a boss, but it would always be someone else's boyfriend, someone else's husband, someone else, whatever. There's not a million of them around. Well, there actually is, but there's not so many around that it's, that you're just surrounded by them, but you recognize them when you see them and you kind of repel them, as an empath. But, you may be tested by the powers that be, by having one slip in, and test you and you really get to check your healing and your self-love and your self-respect and everything like that when you're faced with that, and I did get to experience that. And in my case, it was a twin flame journey, and a lot of twin flame journeys just really don't go well. They get together, they separate, and then maybe get together again, and maybe don't. I want nothing to do with mine. Absolutely nothing. But, it was interesting that when I got exposed to that again, 40 some years later, I get exposed to that kind of scenario again and how I handled it, and I really protected myself and, I turned tail and ran as fast as I could when I knew what I was up against. And, the dynamic is just so bizarre. If you're a child of a narcissistic parent, chances are you've become a narcissist yourself, or you're an empath, or you healed early and just became a normal person. God, we all just want to be normal people. I just want to be a normal person. But I'm really not, so I'm here to, stand in front of all you and be so abnormal, because I think there's people out there that are feeling the same way, and healing, and trying to navigate this whole crazy thing that we got going on, right? Or you've been in a relationship or something like that, someone might have had narcissistic behavior or tendencies, or just outright a narcissist. And in that case, hopefully you survived and got out soon. But if not, I don't know that I even said much, but hopefully what I've said would inspire someone to look at the love dynamic, at least, that, in a narcissistic, would leave out the empath, just a narcissistic and a normal person, you're not connected. There is no connection. It's a trauma bond. And there is no real love. They can say it until they're blue in the face. You can say it to them until they're blue in the face. They don't feel it on either side. They don't feel it coming from them or to them. And you're carrying that emotional weight by yourself, and you're trying to nurture and create something out of something that just can't be, So that's where I beg people to take care of themselves and recognize what that is. My first experience for my first 11 years was with my mom. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what I went through, because it really navigated a really interesting journey for me for the rest of my life. The choices I made for myself, to get past that, and, later in life, choosing to heal and stuff like that. I'm glad I went the empath route, that I cared about people, that I love people. I want to see people succeed. I want to see people happy. That's what makes me happy. When people are happy, I'm happy. When they're not, I feel everything they feel. And I feel what I feel. And really, if I'm in an emergency situation, like what happened to my friend when she had the heart attack that night, I had to be the calmest person in the room. I had to take the lead. I had to, get my shit together, and just make sure things are on par, because I could feel everything going on around me. The boyfriend, her boyfriend, was in such trauma and shock and disbelief. He was not okay. He was not okay. I had to be okay. But damned if I didn't go home and break down for 6 hours, 8 hours. I don't even know. I know it was just a good chunk of the day, And I would rather be that than someone that can't love, someone that can't care, someone that can't bond, someone that has to have external validation, where you're really just part of a system. When you're dealing with a narcissist in any relationship, boss, lover, family, whatever it is, I totally forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, they can't love, I can't be that. I can't be somebody that builds a system that is so hollow, burying my shadow, and not being able to face my own inner demons, not be able to fill my own emptiness, not be able to, I don't know, that world collapses later in life. I mean, the miserable finishes that these people endure at the end of their lives is so torturous. I can't imagine, so like with our mom, we didn't speak for 6 years. Things went down and we didn't speak for 6 years, and then my sister called and they made amends, and my sister ended up moving there. I had just experienced a suicide in my home. That was a story I'm going to share that I had talked about picking part of that wound that I have to get with my counselor. I have to kind of, I buried that. I buried that in anger, and I buried that really, really deep. So there's the little part of it that I'll share before I make a video of it. He had just committed suicide in my home, and then 3 months later, my mom had passed. And my sister convinced me to call her and, just kind of let's make amends. Let's get this stuff figured out. Well, thank God she did. She's very intuitive too. She's got a lot of gifts. And, so I called and we made amends in peace, and went and spent a week with her in the hospital, and we all was around her when she passed. And she passed in love, and she made amends the best she could. She apologized the best she could. She felt what she could. And I felt that, the little bit that she could, I felt that. And that was everything. That really was everything. So it's not like a narcissist doesn't feel. There's a certain amount or a certain idea of love that they can experience, but it's so distorted and so twisted and so empty, but that little bit of love I felt from her there at the end, I'm glad I came out on this side. I'm glad I came out as the empath. I don't know if that was a choice I made as a kid. My sister, she's an empath as well. I don't know if that's a choice that she made as a kid, but you carry that through life, and it changes and it grows, and it I don't know, like mine's changing now. Like I said, I'm absorbing less. I'm controlling how other people affect me. And what I take in as my own experience, because that's what happens. You literally take someone else's experience and you feel every bit of it as if it's your own. So it's almost like creating false memories, that you've gone through something that you didn't go through. But it's that you can feel and read and see and absorb someone else's experience so intensely, so I'm working this dynamic differently. Instead, I'm trying to not absorb, but reflect light, reflect love, reflect kindness, and just try to change the energy and dilute their experience in their pain and everything, just for the few minutes that I'm there, whatever it is. But as you elevate and as you grow, so does it. And boy, that's kind of unfair sometimes, because you're still trying to deal, on a day-to-day basis. You're trying to navigate this. And, it's not easy. And then as you change and elevate, and it's changing and elevating, but you still haven't navigated it from 6 months ago, So it's an interesting experience, if you feel like you're in a narcissistic situation, whether it's parents, family, friends, boss, lovers, husband, whatever, I would suggest really researching that. Carl Jung does a lot of videos on, or AI does a lot of videos using Carl Jung's research and life work. Now, he himself is not the greatest man, and wasn't the greatest to his wife. But he really did have a lot of good information on, the feminine, divine feminine, and empaths, the narcissistic empath dynamic, and what that looks like, and the spirituality of that too. So depending on what your higher power looks like, sorry, I got like hair hanging off my arm. Depending on what your spiritual or religious or whatever looks like, what he says may or may not fit. But I found a lot of great information in there, and it's kind of helping me heal those layers with my mom that I didn't realize were still untouched. And it's also making me realize some things about the situation that I left about 7 months ago with a narcissist. And so I was healed enough to turn tail and run out of that real quick, but in that, I also had to realize there's layers from my childhood I still have to look at. I still have to heal. And healing is probably lifelong, and you're always going to have more to heal from as you go along in life. So, that's kind of why I'm here. Let's do this together. I feel a soul tribe out there. I don't know who, I don't know what. I'm talking into the void, into a camera. I can't stand looking at myself doing so, but, here it is. And I have friends that are, also living their lives out loud and on camera. And, it's really wonderful. It's fascinating. And I'm inspired by their stuff. And I think they're inspired by mine sometimes. Mine's colorful sometimes, so maybe not always, and that's okay. But yeah, self-love and self-respect and choosing people in your life that have the same is very powerful, very powerful. The man that I'm with now has self-love and has self-respect and knows his worth, and therefore he can treat me in kind. He knows my worth. He knows how to love me, and he respects me. And I don't think this man would do a thing to hurt me, ever. It's still early on and all that, but you know what I mean? My intuition and my empathy and everything feels what he feels. And I think I found gold, you know? But, if you have self-love and self-respect and you know your self-worth and you end up in a dynamic like I was 7 months ago, or in your childhood or anywhere in your life, you're going to recognize those patterns. You're going to see how unhealthy that is. And you're not responsible to heal other people from their trauma, you know. And I feel for people that deal with BPD, because it stems usually from horrific childhood trauma. And, so there's always that empathy for that. But you're not responsible to heal them. You're not responsible to sustain them in their lack of healing. If they're choosing not to heal, they're not getting help. And an empath is absolute gold to them, because you're just an endless supply of energy and affection and attention and forgiveness, consideration. But it will destroy the empath. And if you're an empath, or you think you might be an empath, or you've been in any of these dynamics where you have been controlled by a narcissist, I would definitely look at your self-love and theirs. If you're feeling like somebody that you're having any kind of dynamic with lacks self-love, self-respect, or they're even telling you outright, I don't like myself, I don't love myself, please heed the warning, because they can't do that for you either, and I would rather you save yourself as fast as you can, you know, um, recognize the patterns and really look at yourself and what your worth is, and that you're not responsible to fix someone else's situation, their behavior. You don't need to teach somebody how to love you. You don't need to teach or even ask people to treat you right. You know, um, if you have self-love and self-respect and self-worth, you're just gonna expect that. And if they do that in the beginning and then they switch up on you, turn tail and run. You don't need that. You don't need that. I deserve more. You deserve more. And if it's your family or parents, that's a different dynamic. Mine passed away, so I didn't have a lifelong thing of trying to have a healthy relationship with her. And for a lot of people, they're going to try for a lifelong thing to have a healthy relationship with a narcissistic parent, unless they get help, professional help, and they choose to heal. There's really no cure for narcissism, the BPD, but they can navigate it in a positive and healthy way if they choose to. If you're in a dynamic where that choice is not being made, then please choose to take care of yourself. You deserve it. You're nobody's puppet. You're nobody's emotional punching bag. You're nobody's um, emotional stability system to keep their system intact. You know, um, you know, you may be a mirror. You could be a mirror, but you don't have to be their mirror. So I don't know. I'm not even sure I did this how I wanted to. I wrote notes, I looked at a couple, whatever. Um, but I wanted to get this video out. I hope I did okay. I hope it maybe helps somebody, even if just not just me, you know. Um, but for all you empaths out there, we're going to do okay. So, all right, everybody, I love you. This is Wendy. This is Let's Talk About Love. Have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Signing out.